Well, first of all, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you also to the organisers for the opportunity to speak to you today. You may actually be wondering what I'm doing talking to you here, because it rather looks as if we're going slightly off at a tangent, or certainly off-piste. And I must admit, I was thinking that when I was invited to attend this, but as an organisation, we're very hungry to learn about new technology and new developments, because they're rolling over the marine industry, which has a reputation for being quite conservative, very fast. So we're always looking out for new developments, and as I go through the talk today, hopefully you'll understand. But as a result, I decided not to prepare any slides, because I had absolutely no idea what I was going to talk about, but over the last 2 hours, my ideas have formed. One thing I would add about Lloyd's Register, it's one of the UK's largest charities. It's now the Lloyd's Register Foundation, and it gifts grants of between £10 and £20 million a year to higher education institutions, primarily to support its mission, which is the protection of life and property at sea and preservation of the marine environment. And also, which is slightly sort of topical today, given the talk by my co-speaker from the NOC in Southampton, we're moving our entire marine global office from London to a site on the campus of Southampton University, and we'll be moving in the summer of next year. We're very pleased to be able to be doing this. I think it's another sign of collaboration between business and the higher education sector in the UK. I think it's one of the largest ventures that they've embarked on. And on the site there will also be a towing tank, a wind tunnel, and other materials laboratories which are vital for the work we do. Because as someone said before, you can't make regulation unless you understand technology, and that increasingly is a problem for the regulators, because as I'll say during my speech this afternoon, we've got new regulations coming towards us very rapidly that in many cases we have no technical solution for. I think it's also quite topical to be here. Someone also already mentioned Titanic. I think in the shipping industry, clearly Titanic was a slight problem for the image of the industry going back just over 100 years, but it did provoke the first international convention known as SOLAS, or Safety of Life at Sea, which was really the first attempt by the global community to create some sort of regulation to make shipping safer. That convention celebrates its 100th anniversary in 2014. And the International Maritime Organization, which regulates the maritime industry globally and is based in London, is keen to celebrate that. And I thought it would be great if they could come to the Titanic Centre, because after all, the Titanic was the catalyst for that convention. So to move on to the embracing new technology and ships to the future, you can see the port of Belfast out there. Obviously, the ships look fairly static, but if you knew what was going on in the minds of those ship owners, you'd realise it's not a great picture for many. There's a relentless pressure on operating costs caused by global competition, caused by seeking clearly the lowest operating costs, and that means seeking low-cost crew, which means crew from third world nations quite often, which also means crew that have increasingly lower technical capability. But at the same time, people are putting more and more technology onto their ships. And you're beginning to see some of the crunch that develops. And often you'd say that a lot of the crew on the ship don't fully understand how some of the equipment that they operate actually works. And therefore you tend to rely on shore-based people coming on board with new software or fixing the computers that have gone wrong. So clearly, if you sort of work to a logical conclusion, then one of the possibilities is you go to remote-operated ships. Now, I know that we've tried to get rid of Air Force pilots by going to drones, and many of you probably don't realise, but most of your aircraft that you fly and could fly totally remotely without the need for a pilot at all. But I think for your reassurance, they often stick someone in the cockpit. And in the same way, and I'm being slightly flippant about this, but in the same way, it's going to take quite a social change before you actually remove crews from ships. As one of the previous speakers said, remote operating vehicles create some interesting challenges for all sorts of regulations to stop collision. But as we were embracing new technology and these new satellites, then there's clearly a potential for remote operated ships. There's better digital radar coming out of the market. there's better automated navigation, and there's better collision avoidance technology. So in the same way that I think a lot of people think that the roads would be a lot safer if none of the drivers actually drove but just relied on satellites to move their cars to their destination, in the same way, given that 80% of all marine accidents are caused by the human element, just imagine how insurance costs for the marine industry could reduce if you could reduce or get rid of the human element. Now again, I'm taking this to a logical and somewhat ridiculous conclusion, but you can see the way that this technology is converging and providing potential solutions for the future. But in an industry that is incredibly conservative and tends to be starved of investment, you can see that actually there's a huge opportunity for someone from outside the industry to come in and come up with some of these solutions. The industry is also dogged by higher fuel prices. That's not going to go away anytime soon. So clearly you've seen optimization using computerized methods to revolutionize sort of old techniques of fluid dynamics. Latest engine propulsion technology, as you've seen in the auto industry, is migrating to the marine industry in terms of leaner engines. Alternative fuels using gas. But the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, was strengthening regulation. From the 1st of January 2015, these ferries out here will not be able to burn fuel that has got virtually any sulfur in it at all. So the ferry companies are wrestling with, should they simply burn diesel, which is certainly going to put up the price of diesel for those of you who drive diesel cars. Not quite sure how much it will affect you here in Northern Ireland, but I think within the EU it could be quite an issue. I think the other thing is that they're wrestling with scrubber technology. For those of you that aren't familiar, a scrubber is something that takes a lot of the chemicals out of emissions. In a land-based context, it's been used for a while, but in a marine context, it's virtually untried and extremely unreliable. And again, there's a technology leap that we need to go through, because so far all the sort of experiments about fitting scrubbers on board ships have not resulted in great success. We also have the Ballast Water Convention looming ahead of us. It's not yet ratified, but when it is, that will also require new systems on board ships to clean their ballast water. We have new safe navigation regulations coming in, requiring more equipment on board ships. And also, the International Labour Organization has promoted the Maritime Labour Convention to try and improve the working conditions of people on board ships. And as a regulatory organization, we've certainly been supporting that. So hopefully, although this could seem like a sort of a tale of woe, there is actually a huge amount of innovation required in our industry, which is one of the reasons we're moving from London to be alongside the university in Southampton, because we need to collaborate more with higher education. We need to tap whatever intellectual capability we can find. And Southampton University and ourselves have set up a Southampton Marine and Maritime Institute, which is designed to attract all sorts of collaborators wherever they want to come from to work with us in terms of trying to find these solutions. So, as I said, I think it could be seen to be quite a problematic industry, but also it's a very exciting industry. There's all sorts of opportunities for people coming into the industry with new ways of thinking that could result in huge changes in the way things work. And just finally, just something to think about as you're sipping your first cocktail of the evening, we've also got other elements. The Arctic routes are beginning to open up. The Northwest Passage, but also the routes above Russia. That's creating all sorts of political and strategic challenges, but also some technology challenges as we build ships, ice-strengthened ships that can operate those routes. We will begin to see remote and unmanned guidance operation of ships, probably in a smaller scale, about the size that our speaker from NOC mentioned, but they will slowly get bigger. There's new materials technology. Steel is still used for the majority of ships. And even this year, we had a 5-year-old Japanese container ship snap in half. People still don't know quite why, which shows the power of the sea and the inability of us, even with all our computers and all our knowledge, to make it impossible for ships to break up under certain sea conditions. The other sort of issue we have is obviously a wave of liquidity coming from US investors, which is propelling the shipbuilding industry into a state of activity that it hasn't seen probably since 09-10. Piracy and security, with all sorts of new ways of trying to make ships safer as they go through not just the Gulf of Aden, but now West Africa. And then the entire offshore energy industry, oil and gas, renewables, which is creating a demand for all sorts of new types of ships to service those facilities. So the opportunities are certainly there. In terms of Lloyd's Register, in terms of new building, we're probably as busy as we've ever been. Our main offices in places like Busan and Shanghai, in some cases, are having a problem to keep up with the work, and for the first time I can ever remember, we've sent packages of work back from Asia to Europe, to some of our offices here, because they've got some capacity at the moment. The European shipbuilding industry is largely building cruise liners and small specialist ships. And topically, we've simply, recently sent some packages of work to Holland and Wolff to support us with some of the calculations we need to do with our design appraisal and plan appraisal work. So as I say, there are opportunities for innovation. As I said, I've taken you right away from the subject of SmartOcean. I don't regret doing so, but I apologize for all those oceanographers who've had to listen to this. But what I'm trying to do is to draw some of the strands from what some of the earlier speakers have said into the core of the marine industry. Because, as I said, there are a lot of challenges out there. And if anyone's got any great ideas, please come and see me afterwards. Thanks very much.